wall behind his station, then back at Mateo. "Sir, step to the side, please." I was 2 steps behind him, holding our son's backpack, because we were heading to family court after this hearing. I watched Mateo's jaw move, the way it moved when he was about to lie smooth. But the guard already had his radio up. "I need a supervisor at the east entrance, now." It was 6:14 a.m. The courthouse had just opened. I was wearing the gray blazer I bought at a Ross in Oro Valley because I wanted to look respectable for the judge. My hands were full of folders. My mouth went dry in a way I recognized from every fire scene I had ever walked into. That specific dryness that means something is already burning that you haven't found yet. Mateo turned to me, calm, like he had practiced this. "Camila, go wait in the car." I didn't move. The supervisor came down the hallway fast. Behind him, 2 El Paso PD officers. The guard was pointing at the poster, then at my husband, then at the poster again. One officer said the name on the poster out loud. It wasn't Mateo Reyes. It was something else. A name I had never heard in 14 years of marriage. I watched my husband's face do a thing I had only ever seen on suspects in interview rooms. The micro collapse, the tell, to understand how I ended up standing in that lobby holding a 6-year-old Spider-Man backpack while federal marshals cuffed the man I'd slept next to for 14 years. I have to take you back. My name is Camila Aguirre. I'm 42 years old. I'm an arson investigator for the El Paso Fire Marshal's office, and I have been for 16 years. My job is to walk into buildings after they finish burning and figure out who lit the match. I can read a burn pattern the way most people read a menu. I can smell accelerant through smoke damage. I can tell you, just from the way Shar climbs a wall, whether someone poured gasoline from a can or spilled it from a bottle. And for 14 years, I could not see the fire in my own house. Mateo and I met at a wedding in 2009. He was the best man, I was a bridesmaid, we were both 28. And he made me laugh so hard during the first dance that the photographer told us to step off the floor. He said he was in commercial real estate. He said he traveled a lot for work, mostly down into Chihuahua and Sonora, scouting warehouses for logistics companies. He had a smile that made strangers hold doors for him. We got married in 2011 at a small ranch outside Las Cruces. My abuela Luz flew in from Nogales. She was 79 years old then, 4'10", and she watched Mateo for the entire rehearsal dinner without saying a word. On the morning of the wedding, she sat on the edge of my hotel bed while I was doing my eyeliner, and she said, in Spanish, the thing she always said, "Micha, a man shows you who he is twice. Once when he's trying to win you, and once when he thinks the room is empty." I laughed. I told her Mateo was a good man. She patted my hand. She said, "We'll see, mija, we'll see." Our son Benicio was born in 2018. He had Mateo's dimples and my stubborn chin and, from the age of about 3, a complete obsession with trains. Not cartoon trains, real ones. BNSF freight trains, Union Pacific, the Sunset Limited that ran through El Paso at 2 a.m. Mateo was a good dad to him. I want to say that, and I want it to be true, because it was. On weekends, he'd take Benicio down to the rail yard on Paisano, and they'd sit on the hood of the truck and count cars. And listen, here's the thing. Mateo was gone a lot, 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. Juarez, Chihuahua City, once a month down to Torreon. He'd come home with receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of and stories about industrial parks. I never questioned it. My own job kept me at burn sites until 11 p.m. some nights. We had a rhythm. I had a habit back then, a stupid little habit, of writing down the license plates of every car parked weird on our street. Occupational thing. You walk enough arson scenes. You start cataloging vehicles. Mateo used to tease me about it. He called it my paranoid notebook. I kept it in the center console of my Tahoe. Remember that notebook? The thing about our marriage was that it looked from the outside and from the inside like a real marriage. We had a mortgage on a 3-bedroom in the Sunrise neighborhood. We had a dog, a rescue mutt named Ceniza, which means ash in Spanish. And yes, I named her. We had family dinners on Sundays with my parents. We had a savings account at Chase that Mateo managed because he said he was better with the apps. I want you to picture the house for a second because the house is important. Saltillo tile in the entryway, always cold under your feet even in July. A kitchen that smelled like coffee and whatever my mother had last brought over in Tupperware, usually calabachitas or arroz con pollo. Mateo's leather work bag hanging on the hook by the door, the leather soft and worn down on the strap where his thumb rubbed it. I knew that house by smell, by sound, by the specific creak of the third step from the top. I thought I knew it. Houses keep secrets from you. That's the first thing you learn investigating arson. The building that burned down was never the building you thought it was. I was half right about having a real marriage. Half. The slow poisoning started last summer. I remember because Benicio had just finished kindergarten, and we were planning a trip to the White Sands. First thing, Mateo got a new phone, a second phone. He said it was a work phone, that his company was making everyone carry them for client compliance. The phone was a Samsung, the older kind with the blue case. He kept it in his glove compartment. He said the battery was bad, so he didn't carry it inside. Second thing, his cologne changed. He had worn the same Bleu de Chanel since 2012. I knew that smell the way you know the smell of your own pillow. That summer, it became something sharper, more citrus, with a chemical undertow I couldn't place at first, like the bergamot in a cheap duty-free bottle. I asked him about it once in the bathroom while he was shaving. He said his regular one gave him a headache now. Hormones or something. Getting old. But I stood in our closet later that week with my nose pressed into the collar of one of his dress shirts, and underneath the new cologne there was another smell, fainter, a woman's perfume, something like gardenia and powder. I hung the shirt back up. My face was hot. I told myself I was imagining it. Third thing, the gym bag. Mateo had never set foot in a gym. Last June, he joined a Planet Fitness on Mesa Street and started going at 5 a.m. before traffic. He came home smelling like chlorine half the time. Planet Fitness doesn't have a pool, I noticed. Of course I noticed. I'm trained to notice. But I filed it under midlife thing because the alternative was too expensive to look at. Fourth thing, this is the one that started the crack. In July, I was putting laundry away, and I found a receipt in the pocket of Mateo's jeans. Hotel Lucerna in Juarez, 2 nights, 1 king room. The dates were a weekend he'd told me he was at a bachelor party in Albuquerque. I stood in the walk-in closet holding this receipt, and I heard my abuela's voice. A man shows you who he is. I put the receipt back in the pocket. I didn't wash those jeans. I put them on a hanger in the far back of the closet, and I started a folder on my work laptop. I labeled the folder Structural. Fifth thing, he stopped sleeping with me. Not all at once, just the slow fade of a husband who's getting it somewhere else. When we did, he kept his eyes closed in a way that wasn't the way he used to close his eyes. Sixth thing, Benicio, my 6-year-old. In August, I was giving him a bath, and he was playing with his little plastic train, and he said, completely casual, "Mommy, when is the lady coming again?" I kept my voice level. "What lady, mijito?" "The lady who came to Daddy's storage." "Daddy has a storage?" "The one in Mexico. She was nice. She gave me a Coke." I sat on the edge of the tub. My hand was in the water, and I remember the temperature, how warm it was, and my son was humming a song, and I said, "That sounds fun, baby." "When was that?" "When Daddy took me to the trains, remember? He said, 'Don't tell you because it was a surprise.'" I said, "That was sweet." I washed his hair. I put him to bed. I read him the Thomas book 3 times because he asked. Then I walked out into our backyard, and I sat in one of the plastic chairs, and I did not cry. I did not make a sound. I sat there from 9:14 p.m. until 1:30 a.m., and I thought about every single burn pattern I had missed in the last year of my marriage. The backyard at that hour had its own texture. A coyote somewhere past the wash, then another answering. The click and sigh of the neighbor's evaporative cooler cycling on and off. The plastic chair sticky against the backs of my thighs. A moth kept slapping itself against the porch bulb. I remember counting the slaps. I got to 84 and stopped counting. The air smelled like creosote after a rain that hadn't come. That dry electric smell El Paso gets before a storm decides not to happen. Inside my house, my husband was sleeping. Inside my house, my son was sleeping. Inside my chest, something had already caught and was taking oxygen. That Sunday, I did one small thing. I didn't tell Mateo, and that one small thing broke everything open. I drove to the fire marshal's office at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, when I knew it would be empty, and I pulled the internal records I had access to through an interagency database we used for arson for hire cases. I ran Mateo's social. I ran his date of birth. I ran the VIN on the Ford F-150 he kept parked at a storage unit off Alameda that I had never been inside. The F-150 came back registered to a name that was not my husband's. My hands were steady. I want you to know that. My hands were completely steady. I ran the name. The name had a file. The file was federal, and the file referenced an outstanding warrant out of the District of New Mexico for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The photo on the warrant was my husband. I closed the database, I logged out, I drove home. Mateo was making pancakes. Benicio was on the floor with Sinisa. Mateo looked up and said, "Hey, where'd you run off to, babe?" I made coffee. I said, "Had to check on a site. Arson never sleeps." He laughed. He said, "My little fire detective." He kissed the top of my head. I smiled. I ate 3 pancakes. I felt nothing. That week, I started collecting. Quietly, methodically. The way I would build a case for the DA. I started with the phone. The Samsung in the glove compartment. One morning, while he was in the shower, I took it. He had the same passcode he used for everything. Benicio's birthday backwards. I am telling you, men who are hiding entire second lives will still use their kid's birthday as a passcode. I took photos of every screen I opened. WhatsApp conversations in Spanish with someone saved as L. Venmo receipts to the same L. $400, $600, $1,200 twice a week. A photo album with 340 pictures of my husband, shirtless, in hotel rooms, with a woman whose face I did not recognize, but whose body I now knew better than my own. I didn't feel jealous. I felt focused, like a scene had been staged for me, and I just needed to document the ignition point. I put the phone back. I closed the glove box. I went back inside and made Benicio his waffle, then the storage unit. I knew from Benicio's bath time slip that there was a unit in Mexico, but I started with Alameda because that's where the Ford was registered. Mexico. A U-Haul facility on the east side of El Paso. I went on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing my fire marshal jacket and a badge, because nobody at a storage place is going to stop a woman with a badge asking about a unit she thinks might have accelerants in it. The facility smelled like hot asphalt and WD-40, and somewhere in the back, a metal rolling door kept going up and down on a track that needed grease. The manager was a 60-year-old man named Raul, who felt very important about cooperating with an official investigation. He pulled the records. The unit was rented to the name on the warrant. It had been paid in cash for 41 months, and it had a second key on the account, issued to a woman named Luciana Medrano. Luciana Medrano. Ellie Raul let me peek at the gate log. Luciana had come in at 11 p.m. the night before. So had the F-150. I thanked Raul. I did not ask to go inside. Not yet. I drove home. Mateo was on the couch watching baseball. He said, "How was your day, mi amor?" I said, "Fine, slow. You?" He said, "Same." I said, "You hungry?" He said, "I ate already. Didn't wait up. Sorry." And listen, the thing I noticed then, the thing I'd been missing for a year, was that every single conversation we had now was a lie, followed by a lie. We weren't talking, we were running lines. I called my sister Rosalinda the next morning from the parking lot of a Circle K on the way to work. I told her everything. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, Camila, what do you need? I said, I need you to take Benicio next Friday. I need him not at my house that weekend. She said, done. What else? I said, I need you to tell nobody. Not mom, not dad, not your husband, nobody. She said, done. Misha, are you safe? I thought about that. I thought about the warrant, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. I thought about a woman I'd never met holding a second key to my husband's other life. I thought about Benicio saying, she was nice, she gave me a Coke. I said, I don't know yet, but I will be. The gaslighting phase started when I began asking small questions I already knew the answers to. I asked Mateo, one night over dinner, what company was paying for the second phone. He said, Global Logistics Partners. I've told you this. I said, right, sorry, and they're based in Phoenix? He said, Dallas. Babe, are you feeling okay? You've been off. I said, just tired, long week. He said, you've been kind of paranoid lately. Writing down plates again, checking my phone bill. I don't love it, Camila. I looked at him across our kitchen table. I looked at the man who had held my hand through Benicio's delivery, who had built the swing set in our backyard, who had cried at my father's 75th birthday. I said, you're right. I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. He said, it's the job. It messes with you. Maybe you should talk to someone. I said, maybe I should. He reached across the table and took my hand. His wedding ring was there. He said, I love you. You know that. I said, I know. 2 nights later, he escalated. I had made the mistake of leaving my work laptop on the dining room table with the structural folder minimized. I know he saw it because the cursor was in a different place when I came back from the bathroom. That night, he climbed into bed beside me and put his hand on my hip the way he used to when we were first married. And he said, into the back of my neck, you'd tell me if something was wrong with us, right? You wouldn't go behind my back. I said, of course. He said, because that would be the dumbest thing you ever did, Camila. You know that. It was not said like a threat. It was said like a weather report. Like he was telling me it might rain tomorrow. It was said. I lay there with his breath on my neck, and I counted his exhales until they evened out. And when I was certain he was asleep, I got up and I walked to the kitchen and I drank a full glass of water standing at the sink with the light off. My hand, again, did not shake. I want you to understand something about that. The steadiness was not courage. The steadiness was the thing you feel when a structure you have lived inside for years finally reveals its load-bearing wall and the wall is rotten. You don't panic. You just start sketching the exit. The next morning, he made Benicio eggs and sang along to the radio. It took me 3 more weeks to build what I needed. In that time, I did 5 things. 1. I made contact with Luciana Medrano's husband. His name was Arturo. He managed a car dealership in Las Cruces. I called him from a burner. I told him who I was. I told him what I had. There was a very long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, I've known for 8 months. I have my own folder. When do you want to meet? We met at a Denny's in Anthony, Texas, halfway between our lives. Arturo was 38 years old, tired, and he'd already filed for divorce. He slid his folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers from a shell company called MR Holdings, LLC, to accounts in Luciana's name. The total across 14 months was $683,000. My husband had moved $683,000 out of our shared life into hers. I said, Arturo, you have more than I thought you had. He said, I'm a car dealer. I know when someone's lying on a credit app. 2. I pulled our financial records. Everyone. The Chase app Mateo managed had a second linked account I had never seen. He'd been skimming from our home equity line for 3 years. Not enough per month to trigger me, just enough. 4,300 here, 2,900 there. 3. I got a lawyer. Her name was Delfina Ortiz, and she'd handled a civil case I'd been an expert witness in 2 years earlier. She looked at my binder and said, "Mrs. Aguirre, this isn't a divorce case. This is a federal case with a divorce stapled to it." 4. I got a recording. One night, Mateo was in the garage on the Samsung. I stood on the other side of the door with my own phone's voice memo running. He thought Benicio was asleep and I was in the shower. I had left the shower running for cover. He said, in Spanish, the thing that ended him. He said, "Luciana, listen to me. If she finds anything, she's a liability now. We move the money to Sinaloa, I transfer the house into your name, and she gets handled, okay? I'm not losing everything because my wife plays detective on weekends." She gets handled. I played it back 3 times that night in my car, in a Target parking lot. I did not cry. I sent a copy to Delfina. I sent a copy to my sister. I sent a copy to a cloud account my husband did not know existed. 5. I called Abuela Luz. She was 89 by then, still in Nogales, still sharp. I told her. She was quiet for a full minute. Then she said, in Spanish, "Mija, the room was never empty. You just couldn't see into it yet. Now you can. Now you do what fire does. You clean." Delfina and I picked the date. A family court hearing Mateo had himself scheduled to formalize Benicio's school district paperwork for the fall. He thought we were walking into the El Paso County Courthouse to sign routine forms. He'd been pleasant about it all week. He'd even bought Benicio a new lunchbox. What Mateo did not know was that Delfina had called the U.S. Marshals 2 days earlier. She had handed them the federal warrant file I had pulled. They had confirmed it was active. They had agreed to have officers present at the east entrance, coordinating with courthouse security. And what Mateo really did not know was that Delfina had filed an emergency motion the night before, requesting that the recording I had made in the garage be admitted into the family court record as evidence of intent to harm, relevant to custody. Judge Hollis had reviewed it at 9 p.m. in chambers. He'd granted the motion. The recording would play at the start of the hearing, in open court. I picked the gray blazer. I picked Benicio's Spider-Man backpack because I wanted something of my son's in the room with me. I picked to drive separately, and I told Mateo I had to stop by the fire marshal's office first. He said, "Sure, babe, see you there." I got to the courthouse at 6:05 a.m. I walked past the east entrance. I saw the wanted poster the marshals had given the guard the night before. The guard, a man named Javier Moreno, nodded at me. We had worked a warehouse arson together in 2019. I nodded back. Mateo arrived at 6:13. It was 6:14 a.m. when Javier put his hand up. "Sir, step to the side, please." The supervisor came. The officers came. One of them said the name on the poster out loud. "Mr. Saavedra, Hector Saavedra, you are under arrest on a federal warrant out of the District of New Mexico." Mateo, or Hector, looked at me. His face did the thing, the micro collapse. He said, "Camila, what did you do?" Here's what I want to tell you about that moment. It did not feel like victory. I had rehearsed it in my head, 100 times in 100 cars, in 100 parking lots. And in every rehearsal, I had imagined a kind of clean, satisfying click, the sound of a lock finally turning. What I felt instead was closer to what I feel standing in the cooled shell of a house after a fire is out. The walls still ticking, the smell of wet ash, the knowledge that people had lived inside this structure, and that the structure was now a thing you had to walk through carefully because the floor might give. I thought about our wedding. I thought about him carrying Benicio out of the hospital in that too big car seat, his hands trembling because he was scared of dropping our son. I thought about him in the backyard with a post hole digger, building that swing set, sweat coming through the back of his t-shirt in the shape of a cross. I thought about the moth on the porch light. I thought about my abuela at the rehearsal dinner, not saying a word, just watching. I thought about Benicio's bathwater, still warm. It took maybe 3 seconds for all of that to move through me. It felt longer. I said, I did my job. They cuffed him in the courthouse lobby. His knees did not buckle. I'll give him that. He kept his voice low. He said, as they walked him past me, "You don't understand what you just did," I said. "I understand exactly what I just did." They led him to a holding area. Delphina was already in the hallway. She took my elbow and said, "The hearing is still on. The judge wants it on the record. Are you ready?" I said, "Yes." We walked into courtroom 4B. The room was maybe 3/4 full because Judge Hollis had 3 hearings stacked that morning. I counted later, around 200 people across the gallery. The clerks, the bailiffs, the waiting attorneys from the next case, 2 court reporters, and a group of law students on a field trip. Judge Hollis said, "Counselor, you have a motion." Delphina said, "Your Honor, per last night's order, the petitioner requests that the audio recording entered as Exhibit 7 be played for the record." Judge Hollis nodded at the bailiff. The bailiff plugged a small black audio device into the courtroom's PA system. My husband's voice came out of the courthouse speakers. Clear, every consonant. In Spanish, with the simultaneous English translation, Delphina had attached scrolling on a screen for the record. "Luciana, listen to me. If she finds anything, she's a liability now. We move the money to Sinaloa. I transfer the house into your name. And she gets handled. Okay? I'm not losing everything because my wife plays detective on weekends." The room went so quiet, you could hear the HVAC. Judge Hollis closed his eyes for a second. One of the law students made a sound like a small gasp. The court reporter kept typing. 2 rows behind me, an older woman I did not know whispered, "Dios mío." Delphina turned to me. She said, "Mrs. Aguirre, do you have anything to add for the record?" I stood up. I held Benicio's Spider-Man backpack in my left hand. I said the only thing I had rehearsed. "I want my son. Goodbye, Hector." I walked out of the courtroom. I did not look back. Within 2 weeks, the federal case Mateo, actually Hector Saavedra, had been running across the border collapsed. Luciana Medrano was picked up in Juarez and extradited. The $683,000 was traced through MR Holdings and 3 shell entities to a storage unit in a suburb of Ciudad Juarez that contained, among other things, 140 kilograms of counterfeit currency plates. The FBI told me later that my garage recording had been the single cleanest piece of intent evidence in the case. They asked me if I wanted to consult. I said no. I said I investigate fires, not husbands, and I was retiring from the husband thing. Within a month, my house was in my name alone. Delphina unwound the home equity fraud. Chase cooperated faster than I expected, because nothing makes a bank cooperate like a federal money laundering indictment on one of their account holders. $89,000 came back to me over the next 60 days. Within 4 months, Hector pled out to 11 years federal. Luciana got 6. Arturo and I spoke once on the phone when it was all over. He said, "You did a hell of a thing, Camila." I said, "You did half of it, Arturo." We didn't stay in touch, which was correct. The enablers fell in smaller ways. Hector's brother Ernesto, who had clearly known for years, unfriended my whole family on Facebook and moved to Ensenada. Hector's mother called me exactly once, crying, asking if I would let Benicio visit her. I said yes if she told Benicio the truth. She hung up. She has not called again. Benicio is 7 now. He started 1st grade in September. He still loves trains. He asks about his dad sometimes. I tell him the truth in pieces his age can carry. I tell him his dad made choices that hurt people, that his dad is in a place where he has to think about those choices, and that his dad loved him even though he was not a safe person to be around. Benicio seems to understand. Kids understand more than we credit them for. A few weeks ago, he told me, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to be a fire person like you, so I can see where the hot spots are." I said, "Mijo, you already can." I took the dental hygiene boards off my dream list a long time ago. And I'll tell you the truth, my real park dream was always smaller. I had wanted, since I was 19, to teach arson investigation at the community college in the evenings. I had talked myself out of it for 20 years because Mateo said it would take time away from family. Last month, I signed a part-time contract with El Paso Community College. I teach Tuesday and Thursday nights. First class of my life, I walked in and saw 22 faces looking at me. I told them, I'm going to teach you how to read a burned building. If I do my job right, you'll also start reading a lot of other things. Abuela Luz is 90 now. She came up for Benicio's birthday. She sat in my kitchen drinking café de olla, and she looked around my house, the house that is only mine now. And she said it again. Different weight this time. A man shows you who he is twice, mija. Once when he's trying to win you, and once when he thinks the room is empty. She patted my hand. The room wasn't empty. You were in it the whole time. You just had to wake up. It's 6:14 a.m. right now, on a Tuesday in October, 1 year to the day since Javier Moreno stopped my husband at the east entrance. 1 year. Benicio is still asleep. Ceniza is curled on his feet. My phone is face up on the counter, and nobody is going to send me a lie today. I'm making pancakes. There is no second phone in any glove compartment in this driveway. There is no storage unit with my name on a second key. There is only this kitchen and this coffee and a 7-year-old who is going to wake up in 20 minutes asking for syrup. The room is not empty. I'm in it. And for the first time in 14 years, so is the truth.